I'm going to go and photograph a wedding this afternoon, so I thought I'd just share with you what I'm going to be using and just talk about lenses if you're photographing a wedding for your first time. I know equipment's a real challenge, what to take, what to leave at home. What I really can advise you is get a lens that can cover the whole wedding, just one lens. So it could be a 24-105, I use the 24-105. I've used that a long time. Very good lens. You could use the 24-70. There's a lot out there, but you just want one lens that you could do the whole of the wedding with. The reason for that is if you keep changing lenses at weddings, you'll lose time and you'll lose images because you're changing lenses, and it's more to think about. Another reason I think a really good one is getting dust on the sensor. I found very early that getting dust on inside the mirror box obviously is not a very good idea. So I tend to fix with, well, I've done a lot of different things over the years, but if you watch some of the other videos, you'll see that I use 5D Mark 1s. And what I've tended to do is keep the lenses on the bodies to avoid dust, and because then I don't have to change lenses. That said, every wedding is different. The wedding today is just one venue, so it's a civil ceremony at one venue, and what I'm planning to do is not use the 70-200 f4 and the battery grip body, as I call it. That's the main camera normally, so that one won't get used today. What we're going to use is the 24-105 and just the backup of the iPhone with the Wi-Fi card or the Toshiba cards. At this point I'm just looking on Amazon and the Wi-Fi card seems to have disappeared. I think Toshiba are going to be the ones to have, so a lot of people email at me about these cards. I use an Wi-Fi card, Wi-Fi Pro 32 gig in the camera. I've actually got a setup now where the camera doesn't switch off, the phone doesn't switch off, and I'm testing that today actually, so I'll hopefully try and do a review on that. So what I've been doing before is the camera will switch off, the phone will switch off, and the battery power, you're saving battery power. But that's for another video. We're just talking about lenses, but just so this is a very important part of just using one lens. I'm literally going to use one lens, one flash gun, very cheap flash gun. Again, I'm reviewing this one. Brilliant actually, only cost 26 quid. So good manual flash gun. So lens selection for today, all one venue, is using the 100mm, well 85 to 100mm end, obviously for most of the portraits, 28mm, 35mm for group shots, and you know, probably pictures of the room, everything else, you know, so you've got everything in one lens. So that's the best advice. I know you're probably looking at all the videos online of pros and they've got bags full of equipment. I can tell you for a fact that the equipment can actually make it worse for you. So bringing it down to absolutely nothing makes your life a lot easier, means you can work quickly, you've got no lens changes. So that's my first tip, is again, it's matching the right equipment to the right wedding. For this particular wedding, this is perfect. Now, giving you a contrast of the other day, if I just get rid of the 24-105, I just don't want to take them off the bodies today because I'm just about to go in about an hour. So another setup I've used, obviously we'll keep that in now because fingers crossed today. The iPad is what I've been using, but is the 17-40. So this has been great, to be honest with you. So I'd use that on one body, 17-40, very low distortion from about 28, 35mm. I think of this as 24-28mm lenses in my, that's what I'm really doing with this. So then again, last week I actually did 17mm. Did all the corrections in Lightroom. I was amazed. I got this church so straight, sharp edge to edge, shooting at about 5.6 with this. Not really, I have to be honest, this is well worth buying. Everyone's buying the 16-35 IS at the moment, but they seem to be putting these in. Landscape photographers always love these lenses, so I can highly recommend that one for church weddings, because you've got one body. So you might have the 5D Mark 1 with the 17-40 on, and then you might have the, goodness me, I've got some kit today here, haven't I? So let's have a look. So that sort of setup where you'd have either one body and swap lenses, which to be honest with you I don't really do. I'd put that on one 5D body and the 70-200 on the other body, and that is brilliant for church weddings. The reason being, church weddings seem to have this different pace, so it's sheer panic, whereas when you do I don't mean me, I mean actually everyone that goes to a church wedding at the moment seems to be running around. So because everything's moving so fast, you've got this on one shoulder, this on the other body. You can flip between the two, and you've got from 17mm all the way through to 200mm, or you could argue even 250, 300mm with a crop, which I do quite often with this setup, no problem at all. So again, for a church wedding, I find this setup works really well. I used to put, for many years, that was the setup, but bringing in the 17-40, what I found that is a real improvement with that lens is when you've got to do some group shots and it's all quite tight and you're at 24mm, the lack of distortion from the 17-40 does help you in the post-production, because imagine how many group photos you're doing one after the other. You might do 8 groups of 6 and 8, so 8 images at a time because of the high closes, and just not having to deal with that distortion, something less to do, and the edge-to-edge sharpness when you've got people on the edge of the groups. This one does suffer. You'll find, zooms do, and you might have to stop down a little bit, but at 5.6 I'm happy with this at 28 and 35. It falls away at 24, but it's still acceptable for documentary reportage. It's not the end of the world. I'm not really critically looking at the edges thinking, oh no, end of the world, but I can actually say this 17-40 has changed things a little bit for me. So I found it quite useful, the 17mm. I didn't ever think it would, because I don't really like super wide angle photography, but I'm putting a crop in when I'm going into post-production. I might do the 17mm, do the church, and then use the correction, because you've got some breathing space at 17mm to pull it all back together, making square crops. Something you've got to play around with and see whether you like doing. But yeah, so you might be thinking, where are all the fast lenses? Because obviously wedding photographers need fast lenses. Now, that is something that you've got to really look at as you do your weddings now, because again, I see online everyone using 50mm 1.2s. And to be honest with you, hopefully in a video I'll get a depth of field app out and we can start having a look at how much depth of field they're working with these lenses, and do you really want to be taking them to weddings when you're starting out. Now, everybody that comes on my courses, I say don't use wide aperture lenses until you're well into your weddings, 50 weddings at least, because when you're at that stage, you start to really relax at the weddings and you know the way that they work, and well, you've got the hang of it, so you can start experimenting with the equipment and maybe opening the aperture up a bit, because you know your equipment inside out, back to front. You can slow people down. Your style, look at, just because people are saying use a 50mm 1.2 for weddings, to be honest with you, it's something I'm seeing copied everywhere. We used 50mm, but we don't really use them at 1.2. I do have a 30D, which is literally stays in the box at the moment. That is the backup camera. Well, it's just something that sits there with a 50mm 1.8 on. Now that I will put that 50mm across onto the 5D bodies during some evening receptions when it's really don't want to use flash and you just really looking for the mood. So the 50mm, it's one of those things that sits there. Every 50mm I have is just like it's brand new because it gets so little use. I just see so much use between these lenses. I've completely worn out one over my career of these, which is something you want to look to do. I know it sounds really weird, but if you're wearing your equipment out and it's falling to pieces, it means you're getting value for money out of it. So this has been there since probably 15 or 20 weddings in. I had the non-IS version, which I soon switched to the IS version because that really helps me. So at 200mm, 160, this area, I really see a benefit with this lens, and when I'm in churches, it really helps you. But I've worn one of these out. The 50mm are always like brand new because I don't use them. Again, this is all opinion. You can go to other sites, take a look. A lot of photographers are coming back with great images with their 50mm, but this is all about starting out on wedding photography. Most of the people that come to me on the courses that are starting out, I find come with the wrong equipment instantly. They usually bring in prime lenses. They might be putting a 35, well, typical setup at the moment, which is absolutely wonderful if you know what you're doing, is a 35mm Sigma lens, the art lenses, and a 135 on the other body. Well, that's fine as long as you've been doing weddings for a while and you know exactly what you're doing. You're critically focusing really well. And you're slowing these weddings down. But that's one big warning I will give you. This is over 20 years. The biggest thing I've seen with weddings is the speed. Nobody waits anymore. Everything's flying along. Couples in the end do slow down a little bit, and you can get 15 minutes where you can get them to, slow down a bit, but don't underestimate how fast these weddings are. And that's why having equipment that you can just use with your eyes closed really is the most important thing. So if you're to go out tomorrow, say you're in Canon, I mean, these mirror each other, these systems. So if you're in Canon and you wanted a reasonable price setup, you could go, I'm selling these bodies. I get a lot of emails about these bodies, these 5D Mark 1s. I can get them. I'm always looking for them, but unfortunately my pricing will be above what you're seeing in the shops. I only look for the best. So it might take me 4 weeks, a month to find you one that I'm happy with to sell you. So the Canon 5D Mark 1 is still a brilliant body. The files are the same as the day it came out, so they were always good and they always will be. So I love this camera. The 24-105 I can definitely say is the one lens to buy. The 24-70 Mark 1 I really like because of the lens hood setup. That was lost on the Mark 2, and I'll go into lens hoods another day for wedding photography, but this lens hood is of no use to us. That is just for protection, bashing it on the edge of doorways as I run through. But the 24-70 Mark 1 Canon lens has got a nice deep lens hood and is very useful. So, and the 24-70 Mark 2 obviously is incredible, yada yada, whatever. So you can get one of those if you want to spend all your money on a lens. You gain a 2.8, so you gain 1 stop, which to me, to be honest with you, is not really that relevant. Gaining 2 stops, definitely, but gaining 1 stops over this lens is never really something I was that interested in. So this is a startup with your Toshiba, so I say i-Fi. Go and have a look at the flash air cards, there you can transfer the images and you're backing up through the wedding. And then a manual flash gun. And I know this is about lenses, but this is a very important element to the whole system. Very simple flash gun. I use Canon 580s for most of my career, to be honest with you, and they're absolutely fine. But well, they're great, but I personally would buy the cheapest simple manual flash guns you can possibly get, and this is one I'm reviewing at the minute. That's 8th power in the middle, more power, less power. That's simple. So we'll go into that. Very, very good. So that is your typical starting a wedding career setup. This is something, when people worry about blurry backgrounds, what we'll do a depth of field. This shocks people when you look at the depth of field. They've got apps for the iPhone, Android. and you can have a look at depth of field. Depth of field charts online are great, but these new apps actually just shock people when I show them depth of field, because there's this obsession with aperture, and what you've got to get obsessed with is focal length and lenses. So focal length and lenses are the key thing to the whole system. To some degree, sensor size is another little argument. You'll see people say that larger sensors make shallower depth of field. Well, we'll do a separate video on that one. But the combination of camera body, focal length, and the right aperture at 100mm with this setup will give you a very nice out of focus background with about half a meter, if not slightly more, depth of field. So that half a meter depth of field is what we're looking at, well, what I'm looking at to try and get all the time. So this half a meter, this is what we're looking at. And as soon as we're going wide, then we've got a lot more depth of field because of focal length. So very useful setup. And strangely enough, I've come through my whole, well, it is a career really, I suppose, and got to this stage, and I'm going out today and shooting that setup. Well, the first wedding I ever looked at, where I went and watched a photographer, this was his exact setup. So that's quite interesting. And what it will allow you to do is complete freedom. Complete freedom. You won't have to think. Jeff Ashkoff is definitely worth going to look at the 5D Mark IV with the 24-105 Mark II. He's done some videos for Canon, well, one video particularly, and you can see he's almost there thinking about doing this setup, the 5D Mark IV. Wonderful. If you've got the money, 5D Mark IV, 24-105 Mark II, very high quality setup. So that's the other option. If you really think this is going to be a 10-year career for you and you're thinking about doing 200-300 weddings and really going for it, I wouldn't even think about it. Put on a 0% card, get the equipment you need. Mine's a long-term business. I love the equipment I use. I would buy a 5D Mark IV and the Mark II version of this, but this is just chugging along and produces amazing results. So that's fine for me. I hope that helps. I haven't talked a bit about lenses there. Those are the three I'm using. Just remember, primes are absolutely brilliant if you're a portrait photographer. If you've got very little experience with photographing weddings, I would really suggest using zooms. Many different reasons. You could be stood and there's a pew behind you and you can't zoom out, and then you bring you up to your eye the 35mm prime on the other body and everything's wide, and you suddenly realise that you really needed a 60mm lens, and you've dialed that into your nice zoom. You're not cropping later on, you're making the most of your camera. So just think about this. It's problems at weddings. People are obsessed with the sharpness of the images, they're obsessed with megapixels. It's not that. The problem with weddings mainly, A, is your adrenaline, because you're just, you know, it's quite a fast-paced thing now, and controlling your adrenaline. The other thing is backing up, so you need a simple backup system, and hopefully I can show you that this is as good as it gets. And we'll do another video on it, because I know you'll want that. But let's leave it at that for now. We're at 20 minutes nearly, so I don't know if they'll let me upload this one. Let's have a look. But subscribe if you can. Trying to do more videos for you in the middle of the wedding season at the minute. So if you're wondering where I've gone, I'm doing weddings. So the next couple of months are really busy. So hopefully we can do a few more. Subscribe. If you like the video, give it the thumbs up. Please comment below. Ask your questions. I know I haven't covered the Nikon system. To some degree, Nikon and Canon are exactly the same to me. They do a 24-120 on their D750. I would say 750D. D750, D700, 24-120, similar thing. 2 cards in that camera, so you don't need this bit. Something to think about. Start thinking about having absolutely nothing to do your first weddings. And I promise you that that will help you a lot. And start testing depth of field. What depth of field do you need? What focal length, so you can get these nice creamy blurry backgrounds. Set people with the backgrounds further away from the couple to get the effect. Just start getting into photography and lenses is my advice, and that will help you a lot. Okay, I'm going now. Thanks a lot.